You're listening to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. Hi, Yellow Chair podcast listeners. It's Helen, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode at Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. Yellow Chair Collective, if you don't know, is a private practice based in several states across America. And if you found any value, please do me a favor. Either follow this podcast, leave us a review, or share this with a friend. It'll really help increase our viewership and help us reach more people like you to help serve in more mental health education and growth. And so thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and let's get back to the show. So Alcina Tran, welcome to the Yellow Chair Collective podcast. Is it true that you at one point early in your career went to college in Kentucky?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Well, it's not a secret, but I followed an ex-boyfriend out that way. So that's how I ended up in Kentucky. At the same time, I also do have family over there, so it was nice to go to college and be close to family as well.
I know you're Viet Cambodian, second generation. How did they end up in Kentucky? Was it like distant aunts and relatives?
I love that question, and I love just the curiosity. That is a great question because they are actually not, in fact, Asian.
Oh.
They are it was my mother's father, my grandfather, who was an American soldier in the Vietnam War. And he left Vietnam during the war when my mom was just 3 days old. And so she grew up without her father, growing up in Vietnam, half white, half Vietnamese. And it wasn't until she was 30 years old when she decided to find him, go search for him. And all she had was his first and last name and the state that he lived in at the time when he was in Vietnam. And so she sent out letters, like went to the Yellow Book pages and sent these letters out. And she got one response. And I was about 9 at the time. And I asked her, "Mom, is it him?" And she said, "I think so." And I said, "Think so?" She goes, "Yeah, his the handwriting is shaky, so he must be an older gentleman." So she got on the phone, made that phone call, and I just remember her face just turning like red, just tears falling down, and it was him. So she found him 30 years later, and he took us in. His family took us in, welcomed us in. So I have aunts, cousins, uncles who are in Kentucky.
Wow. I had no idea you had American ancestry before your parents immigrated here. Because I remember like watching your YouTube videos and just being really interested in like the traditional story of like my parents escaped from war. You know, we experienced a lot of money wounds, but it kind of adds a little bit more complicatedness, to say the least, when you have a grandpa who was an American soldier and just like had to leave Vietnam, and he has a daughter he doesn't even know about. So I guess like what was it like to witness that as a child through your mother's eyes at such a young age?
He knew he had a daughter, but he didn't know if he was ever going to see her. He did not think in a million years that they would reconnect. In my eyes as a child, I remember specific moments where I'm sitting in the back of the car and where I'm getting picked up from school, and just in the conversation, I learned that I have a white grandfather. So he's an old white man somewhere. And so when it came up in conversation where my mother asked me, should I look for him? I said, why not? We have a white grandfather somewhere, so why not? It would be great to find him, because then I recently learned that the grandfather that I did have wasn't even my actual grandfather. So yeah. And so when we did find him, I wasn't, I was just excited. I just knew that it was like just good for my mom to have found her father. And I remember specifically when my father drove us all the way down from Boston to Kentucky. He booked us a hotel. So my grandfather booked us a hotel.
Wow.
And there was a pool there, and I was so excited. I have a younger sister, so I'm like, hey, Elizabeth, let's go to the pool, put on our bathing suits and grab our towels and go. And in the middle of the hallway, like coming towards us, is this older white man, and he has roses in his hands. And I turned to my sister and I said, Elizabeth, I think that's him. So I go run back to the room, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, he's here. I think he's here. And yeah, lo and behold, it was him. He actually gave each of us a rose. And as soon when he walked into the hotel room and they greeted, I told my sister, okay, let's give them some privacy and like let's go to the pool. And then they did their thing. So it's like, wow, I didn't realize what a miraculous, what a special healing experience it is until like later in life, for my mom to have found a parent that she grew up without, and for him to take us in, and for us to have a relationship after finding each other, and for my aunt and my cousin to take us in. I'm just happy that it was like a happy ending. And he passed away a couple years ago, so rest in peace, Grandpa. But I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that my mom had the opportunity to meet him and have a relationship.
Yeah. It sounds like this theme of healing that you're now doing in your work as a solopreneur is like really evident throughout your entire life. Because to experience, how old were you when you experienced that?
9 years old.
Dang, that's so young. I'm assuming just because I'm a therapist, like it probably shifted your perspective about the meaning of life or like what life was about. Because for your mom to be so vulnerable in that way, to go, I want to find my dad, and to witness that before even the age of 13, like that's such a pivotal, like shaking moment for you as a child. Well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I am grateful that you are holding up that mirror for me, because I had not considered that. I had not considered that being a big moment in my life. In fact, I would automatically or naturally jump to when I was 13 years old and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. But now reflecting and thinking, wow, that for me, that's like my mom's big moment. At the same time, I think life would have been different. No, life would have absolutely been different if we didn't find, her father. It just would not have been the same.
Yeah. Because
It's like a happy, it's
Yeah.
like you don't know what you had. You can't miss what you've never had. Right.
Yes.
So it's kind of like the flip side of losing someone. You've just like gained someone in a whole family that you did not know.
It kind of reminds me of the end of the movie Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher. Have you watched that movie?
Years ago.
Yeah. Remember the ending where he realizes like, oh, I'm the common denominator with all of this person, the love of his life that he's trying to save's future. No matter how hard I try to be in her life, I always ruin it. So it's better that I'm not there. And then they cross each other. He recognizes her, but she doesn't recognize him. And he just walks away because he knows like it's better. But it's almost like the reverse for you of like, had that not happened, you wouldn't have seen the transformation in your mom. And I wonder if that might have had like a effect on you in your ability to transform even in your adulthood.
Ooh, I just got goosebumps when you said that. Wow. From this vantage point, it had absolutely healed my mom, and it's a part of her healing journey.
Mm.
And frankly, I am learning things about my mother now that I did not know even just a few months ago, years ago. And I consider her like the OG coach, even if she doesn't have like the formal training and like the certifications. But my mother is the OG coach. She had spiritual books lying around, and I didn't know that until like later. I'm just finding books and I take them for myself, and I didn't realize, wait, these are my mother's books. And I didn't know that even if my mom didn't put a label on it, but she's been on a crazy journey, and bless her heart.
Yeah. Because even to, your company is called Soulful of Life, and you really focus on sound healing and spiritual healing. And I know that you're raising money right now for like a documentary. And to see the work that you're doing of like you just have such an open and generous spirit to serve others in that way. Like I noticed that even the way that you talk about your parents, it indicates to me that you're coming from a healed place.
Mm.
And I did want to ask you, like, when it comes to your vision around Soulful of Life, like how do you think that is a parallel process to what you've experienced in life? And for those of you listeners who haven't learned about Soulful of Life, Elsina, why don't you tell them what you do and like what your vision is and how it shaped you?
Thank you for that question. Soulful of Life, I formalized it as a company in 2022 as a way to formalize my coaching practice. And what Soulful of Life represents for me, it's first and foremost the play on words of soulful, so full of life, and soulful of life.
Wow.
And for me, because of my own healing journey, having experienced so many different healing modalities, having had different teachers at different seasons of my life, I wanted to create a company that would also offer different offerings for people at different stages of their life. And it's another extension of Alcina and my energy, the healing component. So offering coaching, sound healing, healing through music, conscious music. I am also a Reiki practitioner. I just have to complete, a few more practice clients to be able to tell the world I'm, Reiki 2 certified.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so it's just a safe space for folks to come and experience. And what I would love to do eventually beyond that is open it up so that I can be a collective, so that I can invite other practitioners in this space with me. Right now, it's at the stage of, okay, it's Elsina. And then the next iteration is having a collective where I would love to invite other practitioners, where you can come and actually see the different healers there are, the different practitioners there are, their offerings. I would love to be a part of a community, and Soulful of Life this is where I'm at right now, but essentially building it to be a community, a collective.
I do want people to hear about your story as to how you got here. Because, if I did my research and I looked on your LinkedIn profile, and like you worked at Northwestern Mutual, you've worked as a consultant, right? Like you've worked with other different companies in various forms. And some of them are coaching and others are in financial and corporate. But like, can you tell me about your evolution as an individual of like, how did you get to this place?
Oh man. We'll have to take it a step back even more before corporate
Yeah.
America. I wanted to be a pop star. I wanted to be in music. I wanted to be there at age 18. Didn't make it. Wanted to be there by at least 20. But there were moments even before then where I was told, sorry, sweetie, you didn't make the cut. Come back when you're ready. Sorry, sweetie, you didn't make the cut because it's not because of your voice. What do you mean? What is it then? It's because of your look. My look? No one wants an Asian role model.
Oh my gosh.
And I had been in different competitions and coming as a second gen with immigrant parents and not having that backbone or support to know what to expect of times of rejection or of times when you're told certain things and accepting that as my truth unconsciously, subconsciously. That at the age of 18, I said, okay, I guess I wasn't cut out for music. So let me go to school. Let me go get a job afterwards after I graduate. And that's exactly what I did because I didn't think, I guess I was done. And so I actually started in staffing. I graduated with an international relations degree, but then I ended up in staffing in DC. Then I was in the financial services industry. And then during the financial services industry, it was so burnt out because I worked so hard. I would work 12, sometimes 14-hour days. And then I just got burnt out. And I told myself, this isn't it. I quit. I'm done. And at the time, I had a friend who said, Elsina, if you can cook and clean, you can stay at my place in Barbados. And that was exactly what I did.
How old are you?
This was in, 2019.
Wow. That was like 5 years ago?
So
Oh, no.
31 subtract 5. Was it?
31, 26.
34. So 5 years ago, 26. So I was 26 years old.
Dang.
26 years old. I quit my job and I went to go on the island and man, beautiful place. And I'm running at the beach like almost 2 hours there. 2 miles there, 2 miles back. Sun, let me like swim in the water. Life was amazing. But I sat there on the beach and I just looked out and I'm like, why can't I write a song? Why? How is that? I quit my job. I literally have very little savings. And how is it that I can't even write a song while I'm here? And I know this is what I want. So then I was there for a couple months. Then I went back and I ended up at a startup. And the startup was in the coaching space. And I've heard about coaching, but I wasn't quite sure what it was just yet. But I knew that if I come back, I want to be somewhere where I can build. So I ended up at a startup that also provided coaching for companies. And through having been in that space, I was sponsored to get my first coaching certification. And so that was $6,000 that I did not have to come out of pocket for. And then fast forward, I ended up in another program that was recommended by a coach that I met and ended up getting another scholarship that was worth, let's say, $16,000 or more. So all this scholarships I was getting to become a certified coach. And it was because of coaching, receiving coaching, becoming a certified coach, where I realized, this is how I reprogram my brain. This is how I learn how to think differently, how to change myself, how to reinvent myself, how to heal whatever is in here. And there was a coaching training back in 2022 where a coach asked for a volunteer, and I raised my hand. And I was like, I want to be coach. And she said, Alcina, what's the story that you want to rewrite? And I said, my relationship with music, because no matter where I go, no matter what industry I'm in, it's just this thing that keeps calling me. I even left and took time off and I couldn't write one song. I want to know, like, what is this? I want to rewrite my relationship with music. And I don't want to wait until I reach the gates of heaven and God asks me, so, Elsina, what did you do with the gift of music? And I don't want to say nothing. No. And so,
relate.
yeah, so while I was in this corporate space, the artist in me was still very much calling my name. My childhood dream was still calling my name. And I went to, so she took me through this exercise where I saw my inner child and I saw the future. I had a visceral response, crying in front of like 20 something people on the call. This was our last coaching training weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, February 5th. And she asked me, Elsina, will you, in a month, in 30 days, will you sing for your class? And I said, this is our last weekend. She said, we'll make space for you. So what I did was I took a walk with my 13-year-old self, with my 18-year-old self that night, Saturday night. And I talked to her and I said, I know you wanted to be a pop star. I know you wanted to make it at that time and you didn't. And that's okay. You didn't even know yourself, but you had to go through all that you went through, go through these jobs to go learn these different lessons, be able to relate to people who are stuck in roles, forgetting their dreams, to come back and find and come back to you. And you have me now. We have each other now.
It's good.
So then that night I came back home from that walk and I ended up writing a song. It has been so long since I was able to write, and I wrote that song and I performed it for class the next day.
Wow.
But the significance of her question of, Elsina, will you sing on March 5th? The significance of that question is March 5th is my father's birthday.
Wow.
He passed in 2012. And he was the one that taught me how to sing.
Wow.
And that year was 10 years since his passing. So within 6 months of that coaching breakthrough, on August 21st, 2022, I had released my first single. Like I threw a listening and healing party in LA, invested into this whole journey, more money than there was in my bank account. I just asked God, what would it look like if money wasn't an issue? And it was because of coaching and the healing that enabled me to find, like, to reconnect with the artist inside of me. And corporate America definitely has helped me like build thick skin and have tough conversations, and I'm grateful for it. But I was never meant to stay there in that capacity.
That's so good. You know, a lot of people feel the call to faith like you did. And it sounds like there were a lot of, I guess God opened the door for you and you walk through it. But I guess, you know, there are people who listen to this that love music, that love the act of taking big risks, but they're afraid to take the jump. And so in that moment, was it your faith in God that got you through? Or were there other factors that also allowed you the permission to walk through the door?
I love your questions. Wow.
Thanks.
I love your questions. It was that year, it was actually that experience in my artist journey where it strengthened my relationship with God.
Wow.
I grew up in a Buddhist household and I'm spiritual. I accept all beings. I pray to, when I eat, I pray Buddha. I pray to God, Buddha, Jesus, my ancestors. I pray to everybody. But that summer, oh my goodness, I didn't know how I was doing it, but the energy, the strength, the clarity, the momentum, the adrenaline. There were moments where I wanted to give up. There were moments where I questioned and I doubted. And there were days when I was up until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm traveling. I'm doing all these things just to make this music thing work. And I had almost like not hop on a plane because I didn't have my music written, but I had already paid for my music producer to meet me in a different state. And I had already invested like, you know, a few $1,000s into this project. And I didn't even have the songs written. how am I supposed to do this? And I was, oh my goodness. Long story short, I was just at this plane and there's just so many things that were going against me. I booked the flight at the wrong airport. I live from Boston. I live 15 minutes away from the airport, Boston Logan. And yet I somehow booked at Worcester, which was an hour away. And then the flight was delayed. So I'm sitting there with anxiety and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And my friend, I called him like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm supposed to go to New York. And he said, Alcina, you're being tested right now. God is testing you right now. There's something great that you're about to experience, but you've got to trust the process. Something great is about to happen. I hopped on that plane. I only had 3 of the 4 songs written, and I didn't know how I was going to do, because I had struggled for so long to write a song, and how I was supposed to do 3 in 2 days. So within 48 hours after landing in New York, I had all 4 songs written and recorded.
Dang.
And one of them was inspired. You ready? One of them was inspired by the whole right before you have a breakthrough, you may feel like giving up, but here's an opportunity for you to show up as enough. Breathe. Just breathe and breathe. Breathe and breathe. And that's how Breathe came to be. And that was the first song that I released to say, hey, I am Elsina, and I am, in fact, an artist.
You did it on your terms, despite every closed door, which is, I think, so nice, because I think that when you listen to stories, people are always talking about the barriers they've had to overcome. But I'm actually really grateful for your vulnerability, because it sounds like some of the barriers were you. It was like your belief in yourself that you internalized from other people. And I think that that's a dialogue a lot of people don't really talk about, of, yes, there are oppositional forces that will get in the way, but sometimes we internalize those forces in our own lives, and it stops us from really stepping into what God calls us to do. And I'm actually really grateful for your own story about spiritual healing and alignment, because it sounds like that year for you was a lot of realignment, and it's actually really beautiful. I did have a question about, breaking generational curses and historical traumas, because I think that, there are a lot of workshops out there that are making you aware of racial trauma, but no one ever talks about the hard work of facing that trauma. And so I also know that that's something that you've had to deal with, and it plays a really big role in your music and in the advocacy that you do. And so for people listening who are interested in breaking free from that, was music an avenue into the healing? What are other forms of just breakthrough that you feel like you had to experience to get here?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I steer away from saying generational curses, and I say generational patterns as a way to replace that, or generational trauma too. Because for me, curses feel so heavy, and it feels like I need some sort of secret magic potion to cure it. But when I say patterns, it's okay, it's a habit, and any habit can be changed.
That's good.
And the other part about generational healing, so with the music piece, I feel like that music journey alone, I actually feel like I'm going through a transition right now where I am incorporating more of my ancestors and more of my culture into the music. And so I feel the connection between generational healing and music, that is actually a journey that is currently unfolding. And it has started earlier this year with the release of Amitabha and Namo Ayirafak.
Yeah.
And what we did was we put a Vietnamese Buddhist prayer mantra that you normally would only typically hear in Vietnamese Buddhist households or temples. You would only know it if you're Vietnamese, a Vietnamese Buddhist. And we put that on an EDM track. And that bridges the gap between
so cool.
time, between cultures, generations. And so that's the start of that. So just to answer your question there, the other part of my journey that enabled me to get to where I am right now is literally healing through some of the most painful, the most heaviest stuff in family that I actually don't talk about as much or as often. I talk about the symptoms. I talk about how it shows up at the individual level. But I have not talked about in depth of some of the personal things that I've had to go through with my own family. And I think that's probably out of respect as a defense to not put my family's business out there. But what I can say is anger runs through our family. Like anger, deep, deep anger. Like the Alcina you see today, Zen. Ooh. There are memories, like my family have memories of Alcina where there's an ugly version of Alcina. Or a little better yet, Nhi, my Vietnamese name, right? As Nhi, that was mean, that hurt my family, disrespectful, just emotionally just out of control because there was a lot inside of me. My relationship with my family, my mother, I've said mean things to her. I at one point was really angry with her for the decisions that she's made, for some of the decisions she's made. And we've had to work through that. I've had to forgive myself and forgive her and vice versa. And so I appreciate you, calling out how I've talked about my parents a certain way, and it has not always been like that.
I can relate to your story a lot, actually. One of the reasons why I went to therapy was because I had anger issues. And I think it's something a lot of Asian women don't talk about out of shame. And anger is really stigmatized. But had I not confronted that at the age of 18, I remember I used to hurt myself. Trigger warning to anyone who struggles with self-harm. But I remember going to a therapist at the age of 18, and I still see the same therapist for accountability. We have a very strong relationship. She calls me out on my shiz. And I think it's really beautiful when we embrace those parts of us. Because anger is just a signal that there's a lot of hurt underneath that we don't want to face. And I think it's a normal feeling,
I appreciate you bringing that up because at one point, I did not know what to do with anger. Not just at one point, but when I was asked what is my relationship with anger by my spiritual teacher, I did not know how to really answer that. And she told me, Elsina, you've got a pocket of rage that you have been stuffing for years. And you've been stuffing it aside. And probably because you didn't have the space to be able to express yourself when you were angry as a child. And now you need to learn how to feel it and be okay with feeling the rage. It is okay. And also, Helen, thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability and the self-harm that this year and through these conversations, I realized the first time I even had that thought and I had actually done it was when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the act of harm to self, that's like really, I think sometimes when things get so overwhelming, that's a way to cope with our emotions when we can't sit with it. And that's my truth. I don't know if it was like that for you.
For me, I wonder if it has any connection to do with having been hit as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. Me
I'm the
too.
oldest of 3.
I'm the oldest
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why like I have a lot of compassion for my parents, which is so weird, right? Because a lot of people do have a complicated relationship with being hit as a child while also having immense respect for their immigrant parents, because there's so much fear. And sometimes this is not an excuse, but like sometimes fear gets in the way of your ability to think clearly in moments of deep stress and anger. And I remember having to go through a lot of self-compassion work, and still do from time to time when I get triggered, of it's okay, Helen. Like, I know that you're feeling really anxious and overwhelmed right now, and that's normal. That's okay. And thankfully I'm grateful that I have a really great partner who like really holds me and accepts me for who I am and holds my emotions. But I think one thing I've learned in my spiritual journey is that love is a byproduct of intimacy. But the paradox to that is our greatest wounds come from relationships, but our greatest healing in the same way also comes from relationships. But the act of healing, like hearing your story, like you had to go to different mentors and different coaches and different spiritual guides in order to figure out how to reframe and how to look at your life in a different way, where sometimes it does take an opening up again. But even that is scary, you know? So it sounds like it took you a lot of time. What were you going to say?
Oh, yes. Yes. And I also get this feeling that if we were able to go back in time and just be a fly on the wall, or just be able to watch and see what our parents went through, I just get this feeling of it would allow for us to be able to see and understand exactly why they are the way they are. And it's not to excuse, because everyone does have a choice. At the same time, I mentioned this earlier, where I'm just now learning things about my mother, and I'm learning more about her, this year and last year too. It just, now knowing what I know now, I'm just like, wow, like I just want to give my mom a hug, and I can't do the healing for her, and she has to do the work, and she knows that. But I thought I was the pioneer healer in the family. I gotta sit my ego down, and I just gotta say, no, actually my mom has done, because of her and the decisions that she has made in this lifetime, she has stopped and broken a lot of those traumatic cycles.
Yeah. I'm also learning how to embrace and look at my mom in a new way as well. Like it's been a really incredible journey, because our relationship has not always been peaceful, to say the least. And I think it took a lot of sifting through and feeling all of my emotions for 7 years to get to a point where I can then go, I see you, Mom. And I know that you're capable of change, and I see you change every day. And I'm okay. I have the ability to now hold space for myself. But Elsina, I did have a question for you about, there is that version of you at 18 that saw success as being a pop star. That was your pinnacle of success. Since reaching all of this healing, like that's another form of wealth, right? So like, how do you define success now in your 30s versus like as a late teen, just growing up?
Peace, freedom, abundance. And what I mean by that is the abundance is the ability to do what you need to do when you need to.
That's good.
There will be ups and downs, and that's what makes this the human experience. And the younger version of Alcina, maybe more like in the 20s, I'm thinking like money equals success. And money is a part of it because it is an indicator of, where you are on your journey, like your relationship to it, but it's not everything, which is what I once thought or felt. And I'm a Capricorn. I love making money. I love working hard. But for me, success is being able to have the freedom or experience the freedom of being you. And to not have anyone or anything outside of you phase or dictate how you show up. It's like the freedom of expression, the freedom to co-create the life that you want to live, and to be able to experience the things that you want to experience. And yeah, like that for me is success.
It's so relieving to finally step into that place of healing. I will say, like, I remember the moment I felt that. I think it was like my first year of grad school. Every day I would listen to the same playlist. And at that point I had been in therapy for about 3 years, week in, week out. And it was the same song. It was like Lizzo's Truth Hurts. Dun, dun. It was the same song I would listen to before I took a right turn to the parking lot in grad school. And I remember the song started playing and I was like, ooh, what's this song? And the song was like alive to me at this point. I was like 23 years old, and I had been in therapy for like 3 years. And I look over at the stop sign, it's red, and I'm like, oh, that's red. It's a red stop sign. And I like looked up at my dashboard and I saw trees, and I was like, these are trees. And it was almost like this. A lot of people may not have those moments, but for me, it was like almost like a light switched on in my brain of years of trauma and self-hatred felt like went away in that moment. And I just had a moment of mindfulness. It was like peace for the first time in my life. And to feel the steering wheel in my hand, to look up at the tree, to make a right turn, and to actually feel the car going right, and to walk out of class and to actually smile because I was there, fully present. Like that to me was like, finally, but it took years, and it's still taking years. It's just to be fully realized in that way. There's no feeling like it. I wouldn't trade it for any money in the world.
Isn't that something? And I love how you're able to just describe it down to its T, down to the level of detail. You know exactly where you were, what you were doing, how it felt, what was happening around you, that level of presence. And no amount of money can buy peace.
No, that's why it's like the ultimate form of wealth, honestly. And it goes back to like the work that you do with other people and the work that you've done on yourself of, can I go to sleep at night knowing that I'm going to sleep as me?
And also in this bed.
Yeah.
Like there's a roof over my head.
Yes.
And there's this blanket like on this mattress.
Yeah. It's like to feel gratitude because you have dealt with things. And a lot of people think that like it requires a lot of like emotional bypassing to get here. Just be grateful. but it's far from it, right? Like
Oof.
it's being able to walk through both the science and the spirituality of the healing process. I want to be mindful of your time, Elsina, because I know that it's almost 5 o'clock. So I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to let you go. But you really do combine science and spirituality in the work that you do. And so I'd love for you to talk more about your work, to share a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you, and why you love it, like why you chose this career. And then I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. For me, the work that I do on a personal level and with my clients, it's a holistic approach, and that is combining the sciences and the spirituality, understanding how the brain works, what puts someone in a towards state versus an away state, someone feeling safe versus afraid, understanding energy. How does energy work? What does it feel like? What does love feel like versus fear? Training your body, training the unconscious mind, and learning how to just be present with what's here. So it's the science side is it's combining neuroscience, quantum physics, metaphysics, understanding the biology of the body, understanding the brain, the mechanics, and then the spiritual side is understanding, what lights up your soul. What is your calling? What is your purpose? What does it feel like when you create from that place? And if you do feel disconnected, how do we get you back into your body, back there, so that when you do make a decision, you make it from an empowered place? Yeah.
That's so good. Elsina, thank you so much for the service that you provide to other people and for taking the risk of entrepreneurship and just promoting your work. Like I watch your YouTube channel and you're so generous with your knowledge. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to interview with me today. So I'm sure the Yellow Chair audience is going to really get blessed by our conversation. So thank you.
I am a fan of the Yellow Chair community. I love seeing the Yellow Chair Collective pop up. It was, long story short, I found the Yellow Chair collective. They showed up at my alma mater in Kentucky,
What?
in Danville, Kentucky, and I was at the women's. It was last year on Long Beach where they were giving awards out, and I saw the picture up and I was like, wait, you were in Danville, Kentucky? And that was the first year they were seeking Asian American mental health wellness professionals, and they were selected the first ones to go.
Wow.
To my school in Kentucky.
They were doing a
Yes,
presentation on Asian American racial trauma, right?
I was not a part of it, so I don't know, but they were invited to go and present.
Yes.
So
I think I know that. I think Angela Nguyen was the one that went, because I remember talking to her about it. She's like, yeah, I went to this random college in Kentucky. And I was like, that's so crazy how that one interaction caught your attention and now we know each other, and that's so crazy.
what a small world. Yes. We are in the same orbit. But yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for holding space for me. I loved the experience today and the questions that you asked. And I felt seen and received. And thank you for doing your research. And yeah, I love what I do. I don't really have a choice. It's like I either do this or I'm not going to be happy. Like I don't.
That's how I feel about my career too.
It's a calling, but if God did not think we could do it, or if we could not fulfill it, we wouldn't have it. But because of this work, I get to see and witness people's transformations, spiritual awakenings, and I get to see and witness people just come back home to themselves. And when people do that, when more people do that, the world is a much better place. And just imagine if more people could experience heaven on earth, that level of presence, the world would be different.
That's so good, Elsina.
Yeah.
You're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.